Okay, here we go. Let's see how easy this is to manage. So I'm hoping that the YouTube stream is easy enough to follow. Let's just update. The amusing thing is, I actually had to lower my bit rate on. Oh no, I had to lower my output resolution. It seems that Twitch would accept a 4K upload. Obviously, you can only watch it in 1080p or whatever. Twitch would accept a 4K upload. Obviously not stream at 4K. I could then upload it to YouTube in 4K, but I can't stream to YouTube in 4K, but I can stream to YouTube in higher bit rate, but I'm capped by what I can stream at in Twitch. So we're going to see how this looks. I've not looked at many dev streams on YouTube, but I am simulcasting for the first time. So we'll see how this actually works out. Doesn't mean I don't have to upload the video later, right? So, but still live on Twitch. Okay, and I do, as always, have to keep an eye on puppies. So as I get started, they're going to mess around. And yeah. So, what is today's stream going to look like? So I'm going to, today, take a look at implementing a Saga. So I'm going to learn about source generation is really where I'm going to aim today. I still think that I need to implement some form of Saga to implement the whole tenancy enabling thing, right? I need to fire that event at the right time so that I'm not triggering it too early and creating resources I don't need to use, and I'm not going to make a mess that I then have to clean up unnecessarily. So if someone doesn't complete the registration or whatever, then the tenant doesn't get created. And there's probably other scenarios that this is going to be useful for. The fact that it doesn't exist already, the fact that that I can't find, I mean, admittedly, I haven't done much searching, but the fact that it doesn't exist already does give me pause for thought, because it does mean that maybe this is something that people don't want to use, or maybe this is something that is so involved that people don't open source because it is kind of a case by case basis. So I'm just keeping an eye on my more destructive pup. So what's the harm? Well, there's no harm in. Yeah, well, nice. I've now got to get used to looking at two chat panels. Video quality is awesome. Good to hear it. I can if I was uploading just to YouTube, I could go at double the bit rate, which would probably make for a crisper video. But if it's good quality and the code's nice and readable, yeah, that's awesome news. So good to see you. Thank you for joining. I'm glad we got this working. So, sagas. So the idea of this stream will be to learn how to do this. And what I'm thinking is, rather than try and build in complicated layers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and use source generation. So I can create a saga that handles. So the idea would be, in my code, I would want to say, okay, I want to do the register tenant saga, right? And I should handle product created, and I should have, that's because I just put constructor on that class. I want to handle product created, and I want to handle um, um, product updated, right? So just creating some events just for the sake of demonstration, right? And now that is all very well and good, right? But I don't want to have to then write, I don't then want to have to write, okay, well, this is I handle, right? And this is not, hi, Decidius. Thank you very much for the look. I appreciate it. Dota, good morning. So I don't want to then have to write the code that would be, okay, well, now I need to do, okay, I need to public class, product created handler, I handle, what is it? I handle notification. There's an interface that Mediator implements. I subscribe or whatever, right, to product created, which then ultimately just forwards it to my saga. Right? I don't want to write that wire up code. Charlie Munger died yesterday. I'm still a bit of shock from it, although he was 99 years old is a good run. You've lived a long life. I'm not sure I know who Charlie Munger is off the top of my head, but my condolences. But gotcha. Yes. I mean, 99 years old, lived a long, long life. That's why there was a question mark on condolences, but yeah, can't be sad about that. You got to celebrate that sort of life. I have a feeling these puppies are going to give me a run for my money today. Okay, so I don't want to write this code, right? Because this would be class and public task handle, product created, and then I would have to do, okay, now go get the saga dot find, f goes to f dot. Maybe I write this to know what I'm trying to write in the code generation, but I do very much want to make this a code generated thing where if I have a saga, right, then it knows that those are going to bind to notifications and I can adapt mediator messages, events, and it will actually create this for me. That's what I'm looking to do, right? I'm trying to generate this piece because it's always going to be the same, right? It's going to say, hey, this event happened, find the saga that needs to be handled in this and send it on to them, right? So that's the goal there. Inheritance would also work. Um, in this instance, potentially, I could do something there, and maybe I need to write this code, just to kind of look at this in more detail. But this is the sort of stuff where I'm going to do these things as part of this project, and these pieces I will definitely put up on my repository, because I want to start making NuGet packages in my GitHub, of some of the useful packages that I use, so that I don't have to have them as core dependencies in code, and really try and adapt them and test them, as I go. So this is the sort of stuff that I would generate an actual GitHub repository for. But I think I want to do this. I think I need to do this first in the actual code base. So let's do that. And then what I'll do is, as I've figured out, because I was looking at code generation yesterday, and I think that it's possible. And I like, so I've been using the Mediator actual library as kind of my reference for understanding some of this stuff. And I do like what they do. I just don't understand all the pieces. The whole creating the different libraries. I got it kind of working in that it would create a source generator. So this is the actual generated source, right? So I got this working. I have to choose between the stock project and a DB project where I build a toy DB. As in a database of toys, or an actual just tinker around and learn DB? There are apparently major downsides to generated code. How so? And generated in what form? Because there is many different versions of generated code at this point. Microsoft have been tinkering with this sort of stuff for years. So in this form, right, this is compiled code. This doesn't actually get generated on the fly. Hard to maintain, many executions generated code. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways of doing generated code. You can actually build the source tree. One of the ways I did look at this is actually building this through code itself, right? So if you ask ChatGPT how to do this, it'll start you down the path of, hey, create the syntax tree, create this node, and you code it out, right? That would be hard to maintain because it's not very readable and it's not very visible. The method that Mediator uses, and I was just about to look at, was what they've done is they've used a package called, what was it? I just looked it up. Scriban, right? So this is a scripting language, right? And then what they've done is they've created a test handler .scm CS, I think it was. In this is their style. I'm not sure that this is necessary. That's kind of what I'm looking at right now. I'm kind of looking at, okay, well, SBN-CS, SBN, which is a Scriven extension. Okay, right. So they've created that. Programming languages use code generators. Yeah, I mean, so the way that the Roslyn code generation works is, what I do is I write this code generator, and this is assessed at compile time, not at runtime, right? So this is assessed at compile time and generates an actual code file that I can view before I even run the program, right? So I could unit test this. I feel like every time I mention a pattern like that, people think they did it wrong, kind of thing. Patterns are useful, but patterns are often interpreted, and each person has a slightly different implementation of it. So recently read up on Saga as an outbox pattern. Yeah. So outbox is something I need to do, right? For the Kafka stuff. So let me bring up the main project. We'll start there today. Liquid Sky. Like the outbox pattern we essentially doing, except the pattern suggests a table, we use a queue. Right. Okay. So to do the outbox pattern, a queue is just as fine, right? The challenge is if you're using the same technology to queue as you're using to distribute from the queue, then you're kind of stuck to the same technology, right? So whatever you use for the outbox should not be the same technology you use for the actual thing. So if I'm using Kafka, right, I don't want my outbox to be based on Kafka because that would negate the benefits, right? Queues would post-date the pattern, or the outbox pattern predate queues. I mean, so the general concept of the outbox is to allow you to hold on to a message so that you don't lose it if the technology you are sending it to is unavailable, right? Also helps with ordering, and it helps with load balancing because, again, if your system becomes too busy, your messages are still sat there, right? If it crashes, you've not lost everything. Oftentimes, you're caching these requests. What's part of microservices? That good enough one? So when you're writing your events and stuff in your application, you're writing them to the outbox, right? You're not writing them to your actual processing system. So this is Kafka over here, right? This is outbox. So I use a database. I just use a database table. Then you poll. Then this is always polling, and as it gets messages, it sends them out. Yeah. So if you implement, I've seen this implemented badly in that people have used the same technology for the outbox, which negates the point, right? The benefit of this is resilience, application, and message resilience. So I will get to outbox because outbox is something I'm going to need as I get further forward, right? Because in here, my dog does not want to stop barking today, so we'll see how this goes. We have some more definitions while I go out with that. Yep. So in the tenant management application, I have subscribers, right? So when a tenant was registered, I turn around and publish that to my event publisher, which is a thin layer on Kafka here. I'm trying to kind of bundle up the technologies in a meaningful way. So I'm trying to make sure that I am not applying Kafka in these. I'm trying to keep Kafka away from these handlers. The event publisher here is my Kafka publisher, which internally does this. So what I've done is I've made a generic publish method that then generate the producer for that on the fly and create. These are disposed of pretty quick, so I don't think there'd be too many problems. There are too many arguments where we aren't even talking about the same thing. Well, you've got to okay, you've got to I think again when it comes to implementing some of this stuff, it's hard to implement it, and sometimes finding that shared understanding and that shared agreement will also help in making good software, right? So when we first started looking at Kafka, my colleague and I, our boss asked if we need to be separated because we were having a healthy debate which almost turned into shouting. Actually, I think it did turn into shouting at one point because I wasn't seeing his perspective, he wasn't seeing mine, and we didn't agree on how to use Kafka effectively. So I was kind of arguing towards the using it as a message bus, right? Which I now disagree with, right? But we had to have that discussion. You have to have a discussion to understand how the technology is being used, right? So sometimes it's healthy. You just got to keep it respectful. So anyway, the outbox is going to be something that's going to be in here. So what I'm going to end up doing is my event publisher will probably be my outbox. So I'll create an outbox implementation, and then I just switch this out, right? So to the application layer, anywhere where I've used Kafka already is transparent. I've seen bad arguments go bad, or good or bad. It's always hard to see which way it'll go. Again, a solid discussion about a technology and how it is used is not a waste of time in any development, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have a good discussion and you agree upon a path, you've kind of got your standards already. You've established how you're going to use the software. So you've almost standardized, which is healthy, right? It's healthy to make sure you have standards because, again, as I always say, right, consistency in your code base is the most important thing. It's always so technical. They typically just reply nerd. Well, that's not healthy discussion. That's unhealthy debate, unhealthy treatment of a colleague. That's what you've got to do. There is there's a pure technical implementation and there's a practical application, right? So let's try and implement this Saga thing. So these two events are actually the things that I need to look at, right? So tenant user was registered and tenant was register handler, right? So right now I get tenant was registered. It's your parents. Nice. So tenant was registered right now. I'm firing this event. This event triggers everything else. I don't want to fire this event until much later, right? So realistically, what I'm trying to do here is I want Saga persistence here. Right. And Saga persistence is going to I'm going to do something like fetch Saga tenant, something like that, exactly like that is really what I want to do, right? Hi, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. I apologize. Sarav, I'll go with. If you want me to say that any other way, let me know. We get the source code for long. So I'm not going to share the source code for this application. This application is something I want to turn into an application. I am sharing, streaming some of it so that, you know, it is going to be a real application. I'm treating it like a real product. Small libraries and offshoots of some of this stuff. So the Saga stuff I'm talking about, I will build that out as separate libraries and share that code. Yeah. And a lot of the things I'm doing, I'm open to discuss. I'm open to share snippets and yeah. So feel free to ask any questions. I do not mind being derailed. I'm not streaming to be 100% productive. I'm streaming to share this process, and that's why I'm talking about it so much. I think I disagree how you're going about abstracting this. Okay. How would you Delta, how would you abstract it? I would write everything in line and then figure out what parts should be abstracted. I usually try to get a couple of examples, although that's the pretty traditional route. Same. I would write everything in line and then figure out what parts should be abstracted. Okay. So it's kind of weird having two chats. So I will try and read out everything because I'm not putting the chat up on the screen because that just obscures the screen. I've written entire programs in a single file and abstracted them because otherwise it can be hard to tease out the larger picture. Right. Okay. So yes, and I'm not really approaching it from a, a dissimilar way. The only difference is here that I kind of have the experience of doing it on my side, so my point of starting is a little bit more narrowed, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm not building this out. I'm trying to figure out if this fits what I want it to do, right? Again, I'm not scared to rip this out, change this, etc. Right? Again, I'm not starting with unit tests because I don't know what I want here, which is an important thing, right? Unit testing works if I know what I'm aiming for, but right now I have no idea. So I'm going to prototype it out as quickly as I can in a way that makes sense for me. So, but the larger picture is here. I know what I need. I'm closer. Deflux, good morning again. Good to see you. So here, what I'm trying to do is, so this is the part that I would want auto-generated eventually, right? Yeah. Because I know that I'm going to use the handler, right? I don't need to work out that part. The Saga piece, I will have to go into in a second to figure that out if I want to do that. And again, I'm still not sure the Saga is the right thing here because I'm sorry, I have the camera up for my dogs, and the one is stood on the sofa, with his paws up on the arm, just barking at the sky. Right now they just want attention. So eventually this part's the code generated part that I want to aim for, but I think I will go down too deep a rabbit hole to start that today. So we'll figure out this part, and this is going to be the hard part. But what I want to do here is bar saga equal. So that will establish a saga. I'm not sure if fetch saga is the right thing, but retrieve. And then the actual saga here. Abstractions are one of the code smells that bother me the most, since fixing it involves a lot of structural moves. Abstractions are one of the code smells that bother me the most, since fixing it involves a lot of structural moves that aren't easy or fun. Code smells. Abstractions is a code smell. I've not seen that one before. Think of a function that is simply divided in two. I've seen that. I don't mean no end. Better to show the other devs how to abstract stuff though than simply just make comments everywhere about it. I don't know. I'll have to see an example of I can picture what you're doing, but so in my mind, what I'm aiming for with this is very much okay. So think of a 50-line function, and to abstract it, you just divide the first half from the second. Okay, that's an arbitrary. Just I'll break it up so it's not 50 lines. That's a malicious. As I keep using this week again, malicious compliance like clean code, right? So clean code says functions should not be so big, so you just maliciously make it smaller, right? That's yeah, it's not meaningful. Extracting it for the sake of extracting it, Well, it's kind of like, oh, I've got to clean it up, so I'm going to clean it up and in the quickest possible way, right? So I get that part. Um, so let's do. So all I'm going to do here is saga.handle notification, which really doesn't. I don't like this part, but that's kind of the part I want to code gen, right? Because then I've got that wire up done for me. And the idea would be public. This would have public bool is tenant registered. Public bool is user verified. And I'd end up with another notification here, right? So tenant user was verified. That's going to be the hard part. Actually, it's not tenant user. That's user was verified. So in this instance, is tenant registered equals true. Right? The weird thing is here, I don't really need very much in this particular example. I just need to know that it was, right? Because then I'm going to have public void handle user was verified. And this is going to be the harder part, right? Because I'm actually going to have to public void handle tenant user was registered. Let's do that for now. And again, I'm thinking and typing. This is just how I work, right? I'm not I'm not committing to this code. I'm just thinking it through because I think clearer when I'm actually seeing code. But yeah, back to your point, Dota. Yeah, having a big function and just splitting it up into arbitrary pieces because then it's not that is not really healthy. Breaking up into meaningful things, if that function is doing a lot of different things and there is individual components that can be brought out into, you know, again, I'm not going to, this Saga stuff is not something that I want to put in like I can't handle it in this way. I don't want to do if I because I still, even if I do it this way, I still have to have persistence, right? So it is a saga that I'm representing. So I want to represent a saga, right? That is a pattern. Right? Saga pattern. Let's do it a little bit cleaner. I don't like that one. Isn't there a design pattern? I don't want do factory. But there's another one that I can never remember. Do factory. Do factory. No, not what I want. Oh, they changed that. That does now. Ugh. Yeah, I'm bringing up the pattern just for the reference of refactoring guru. That's the one I was looking for. Design patterns, catalog, creational, structural saga, right? Structural. Is saga in this one? Nope, saga is not in here. Premium content. Yeah, I bet there's premium content. Behavioral. That'd be behavioral, right? If it was anything. Yeah, it'd be behavioral, not structural. Because it is behavior. Saga pattern. Let's just bring up the one I don't like. Not like this is bad, it's just, but realistically, because this just has diagrams straight away with examples, and sometimes you need to see the pattern. So it is an actual thing, right? It is something I want to represent. I know I want to represent it. I know that I don't want to just wrap it up inside it and make it behave like it is a saga. I still have to deal with persistence. I still have to, these events are disconnected. They are not going to happen at the same time, potentially. So I do need to handle these things. So I do need to know the tenant user was registered. And the reason I need to know the tenant user was registered is because this user is for this tenant, right? So I need to know the user that I'm actually verifying. The challenge for this one is when I get this user was verified, I have no way of looking up the saga. So that's why writing out this code is helpful, right? Because now I can see the problems that I'm going to face with it. Mainly that I've got, what there's a name for this? There's a name for, sorry, this, yeah, don't worry about that. Nothing should change it except the saga, but if you've got an instance of the saga, you can find out the state of it, is the kind of concept that would introduce, right? Whether it's true or not, I don't care. These might end up as private internal variables. I don't know. Depends on how I serialize the saga. That's what I'm thinking of there. But then again, if I was serializing it, those would have to go away anyway. So, because what's going to happen here is when I persist it, I'm going to store an instance of it, and when I recall it, I'm going to rehydrate an instance of it, right? This is you know, there's another thing that works really well here. There's another pattern that kind of works for this, and I'm not sure I want to go down that path. So what I'm writing here is kind of event sourcing, right? Which event sourcing ties to aggregates, because these are events that happen against a tenant, right? Essentially, kind of. So there's that. That's another way I could go with that. Then the events are stored. Yeah, event sourcing does make a lot of records, and those events are not something in it, so on a track. So this is still, but again, I'm not discounting other options here. I'm not trying to say that this is the only way of achieving this. This is a thing I can do. But the challenge I'm going to have, right? If user was verified, is going to have public string email. Right? It's best to be employed in the most important areas. Yeah. Event sourcing, I want to get at eventually. I've touched event sourcing. I remember when I was first introduced to event sourcing, and it was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But then I've never had an application for it, right? And that's my big problem. My biggest problem is that I lack the ability to pick up something unless I can actually see how I'm going to use it. So I do not work in hypotheticals. So the challenge here is, let me demonstrate. User was verified. Okay. this is iNotification handler of user was verified, right? That's going to go there. And this is an iNotification, right? Yeah, it does. Oh, handler. Helps if you name things properly. I've only been doing this for a few years. Yeah, I more or less punted learning event sourcing because I thought it was unlikely I'd use a concept. Event sourcing and aggregates go well together. They're not one and the same, right? But it really works well with aggregates, and that's how I first learned it, because I was actually on a course where I was doing domain-driven design, well, as part of a week in New York, where I was being introduced to event storming and event sourcing by Greg Young at the same time. So to me, I can't necessarily pull the pieces apart very easily. So CQRS, Greg Young, event sourcing, Greg Young, right? That's why they fit so neatly together. Meeting Eric Evans, who wrote the book on domain-driven design, being able to talk to him was incredible. But yeah, Greg Young. So Greg Young took a pattern that's now user was verified. CQS, and implemented and kind of added some extra layers, some extra pieces, or concepts rather. So this notification is going to come in here, right? What do I do with the user was verified? Because I know I can do a callback from Auth0, and that's what's going to happen here, right? A callback's going to come in here that will be kind of confirm, right? Pairing is helpful, and I end up picking a bunch of concept habits up from the other dev. It's why I like streaming, right? It's why I ask for so much feedback. It's why I kind of say, if you think you can show me something different, or you think I'm doing something wrong, it's okay to speak up. I don't object to a discussion about something and diverting, because I realize the importance of pairing, and learning this is the closest I can get to pairing. As far as learning goes, the ensemble pairing is where most of it comes from. But you have to be paired with someone who is, equally invested in learning, or equally invested in or understands the technology, so you can learn something from it. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to have confirmation endpoint, right? Something's going to come in here, and we know that yeah, we know that we might have to make a horrible sacrifice here. Okay. We can make a callback from Auth0, right? We established that yesterday. So on the email, the redirect to will allow me to do that. And I can pass in application callback the main variable. We contain the origin of the first URL listed in the application's callback URL list. This lets you redirect users to that. So we can go to that. Can I pull a user metadata value is my question. So what would make this easier is if I could do something like, domain / confirm user ID equals, GUID. Have you seen my Agile unit testing blog post? Yeah, you sent me that last week, right? You're more than welcome to link it if you want to. I was talking to who works at Facebook for quite a while and realized we do a bunch of stuff that might be considered better than they did at the time he worked there. A large organization is not guaranteed to do anything better than a single person developing. Do not believe as a developer that you do something that's worse than a large organization just because they're a large organization. Large organizations are full of terrible decisions. They just hide because they've got they hide the garbage because they've got the money to put the polish on. Software development in any level is what you make of it, right? So if you assemble a group of programmers that are not invested in writing good software, you are going to get bad software. But because they're so invested in hiding the fact that it's not good software, they will. Yeah, there's a few terms that aren't very channel appropriate for my channel, but you know what I mean, right? Anything can look great if you lipstick on a pig is the best thing, that is the most appropriate term I can use here. Okay, so if I feedback the GUID, yeah, if you're watching this and you think that, you know, again, because I've done this for a long time, that I'm any better than you are, or all I have is experience. So, but it doesn't mean I'm a better developer. It means that I have different experiences. I can do different things. Some things come more naturally to me after time. Doesn't mean I'm doing them right. It doesn't mean I'm doing them perfectly. And if you think that I'm not, that is what I want to be. That's why I stream, because I want to be able to understand if I'm doing something incorrectly. Like a long time ago, we had I think it was Exy, come in and give me a discussion on what RESTful really meant, and it changed the way I approach RESTful. And then I did API endpoints, which fits more neatly with me, and completely destroyed that. But in theory, I got it. I learned from it, and I adapted, and I changed the way I do things. And my way might not be the same way as everybody else, but that's okay. So let's get to this part. So user was verified. I was going to come in, and it's going to have it's not going to have the email. It's going to have the user identifier, right? So the challenge here is, actually, no, there's no challenge. In this event, I know the state of the system. I'm in my tenant management, right? So here, repository of user. One user? Yeah, let's go with that. User repository. Okay, thank you. And then we're going to write a user identifier. So I'm differentiating ID and identifier. An identifier is a public GUID that I don't mind having the system share around. The ID is the internal ID on the table, and I don't share that. Benefit being, if I export the database is the database. If I change the structure of the database is the database, and the data is the data. And as long as I assign that ID, that identifier to the record still, it doesn't matter what format I change things in. So it's kind of, and I've referred to this before as a public identifier. It's an identifier I do not mind being passed around, because you can identify the thing that, and we can talk about the same thing. So if I publish this to another system, as long as that identifier goes with it, it's fine. And actually, I use that identifier as the identifier in auth0. So don't pass around your internal IDs. Make an actual external identifier that's friendly, or not. It's a GUID in this case, a GUID, however you pronounce it. But yeah, pass it around. So this is going to be get user by identifier. So a specification of user. And it's going to take identifier, and that's that. Okay. So now var user equals user repository. Oh, I already have a generic version of that. I've already created a generic version of identifier one, an identifier spec. So that gets me my user, but that's not appropriate. Right? So if you haven't seen it before, this is Ardalis's specification library, part of the whole. So I'm using result and I'm using specification. The repository comes as part of the entity framework components of that. And what this allows me to do is if I've got a model, I don't have to create this, right? This wraps around entity framework. Love it or hate it, whether you like that idea or not. It wraps around entity framework, but allows me to create these specs, and these specs are very targeted, so I can reuse them, right? I like this pattern. I do like this design. It does abstract away entity framework a little bit for me. It's not like I'm going to change the technology. This is kind of the repository is still kind of dependent on entity framework. It's just that I kind of like this design. And then my rules are in here, right? So user by email, there's my email, right? If I want to do that on a list, I can do it on a list. If I want to do it on whatever. Entity by identifier. So this knows that it's an iPublic identity on that entity. So I can only use it in the right place. So that gives me a user, but this isn't actually what I need. So what I need here is the tenant users. Because I need the tenant identifier off of this one. So this is a new user. A new user, because I'm getting user was verified, right? So there's only one tenant this user can be actually allowed to be part of right now. He says, with great confidence, knowing that that's actually kind of a lie. That could be got around. But in the ideal world, this person is only signing up for one new tenant. We'll have to... I need to start creating a list. That's the sort of thing where I've just basically verbalized an actual requirement of the system, right? I've identified there's an actual loophole in that I could sign up for two tenants using the same email at the same time, which would put two of these out here, and the code I'm about to write would fail, in theory. So the whole problem here, right, was I wanted to write this Saga. I need, there's a term, I gotta find it. There's a term for that choreographing. Is it orchestration ID or choreograph ID? There's a name for the identifier that I'm going to use. It's kind of the common field that is going to be used to identify that object, right? So when I get tenant was registered, this Saga eventually will have to filter down to, you know, this is why you have to persist this Saga, right? Because I'm going to pull the Saga that matters for this object type. And then handle that notification, right? So my public GUID tenant identifier, that's actually, if I had public class Saga or abstract class, right, then that is, I'm going to call it orchestration ID. Orchestration. Orchestration ID. I love how Copilot did not stop me from that typo then. That was impressive, GitHub. So that's that, right? That's my orchestration ID. So that's my tenant identifier. If I find a need for more complicated types there, then I can address that later. But user was verified. I need to have the thing I get most out of around Slack, I think, is there's a lot of dysfunction in our industry. So, dysfunction at all levels. So, good devs continue to have some funny stories. I'm writing this software. So the reason I'm not sharing this code base as a whole is because I am planning to make this an actual thing. That's my goal. I want to make it a product. The problem I'm trying to solve is dysfunction in communication at the development team and product management level. Right? It's not going to fix everything. Right? My idea might not even be that good. It might not be relevant. It might not be helpful. But it is my idea. I'm going to try and commit to this and share the development of it along the way. Dysfunction is everywhere, and it starts at the top and works its way down. Right? If a company is focused on making money, then time is always an issue. Not every developer is stunning, and a lot of developers aim to please. They don't aim to do the best job they can. They aim to do the quickest job they can. And that, if you look at most code bases that are less than stunning, they are often the result of rapid growth. I was talking about OpenAI to Dad and saying how they went from a not-for-profit to a for-profit company. Here, the opposite approach is actually incredibly common. Yeah, profit to not profit. Yeah. Well, think of Amazon, right? Amazon is the biggest success / failure story in history, right? They didn't make money for the longest time. Their company model was basically give it away. Well, actually, just churn through money. They just kept taking on more investment, more investment, more investment, more investment. So those that invested in Amazon from an early point, it really paid them back if they stuck through it. Right? But anyway, okay, let me get this piece done. So here, I do need a more specific result here because I need to know the tenant of the tenant identifier of the user. So I want a. Actually, I can. No, I want. I do need a specification. Tenant user by identifier. By user identifier. Tenant user. Tenant period. So when you create a specification with a return type, right? That will narrow how it's going to do what it's going to do. So Query.where, and I need queried user identifier. So I could, right, return user. So query.where is t.user. Dang it. I join on the internal IDs, right? So query dot where t dot. So this is where I get into. I probably need a navigational point. Okay, Dota. Thank you for the look. I appreciate it. Thank you for the discussion, as always. Appreciate it. Have a great time at work. So I probably need a navigation property here. And no, I don't want that sealed. Not messing around with stealing classes, because what I'm going to need to do is user.identifier equals user identifier. And I think I have to include. I think I have to do that. Because I'm not putting lazy loading on. So I think I have to explicitly state include. But we'll figure out that. And again, if anyone's still watching in the YouTube stream, is it still looking good? Any questions? Okay, so if I get that and then query.select tt.user, right? Good. I'm glad you're getting to watch. That's awesome. Hopefully this is not too disconnected today. So our tenant user by user identifier spec is going to get used in here. And now this changes, right? Because now this is a tenant user, right? Let's change our name, tenant user repository. Right. And now this is going to be tenant user. I just changed that to the wrong thing. My where is definitely correct. That's still correct. Right. I still want the tenant user. Because I want that. That's what I'm actually after. And that's new tenant user by user identifier spec. And that is single by default specification tenant user. Oh, single result specification tenant user. I don't know why. I'd love to understand why this is necessary. So the whole goal of the repository piece is to basically put a layer on top of entity framework, or put a layer on top of your data that allows you to use specifications to kind of narrow and allow for, reuse. Because my specification is my specification focused on an object. It's not. It doesn't care about how I'm using it or whatever. I can use that specification in multiple places. But yeah. So anyway, with a tenant user, If it's null, then ouch. Null. Right, I should have a tenant user. That's bad if I'm confirming a user that I do not have a tenant user for. So, okay. Well, I've been streaming for an hour. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to walk the pups outside, give them a bit of a stretch. But I will be right back, and then we'll finish this piece up and continue with the saga. So, be right back. Okay. Thank you for sticking around. Appreciate it. Wow. YouTube is significantly behind in terms of time. Oh no, it's okay. It pauses. Okay, so let's finish this up. So in this instance, now I have my tenant user. I have a tenant. I need to go and get the tenant, right? So tenant user is going to have public virtual tenant. So I do want to make that tenant. Tenant identifier, but from user identifier spec. Can you increase it? I can try. Let's see. Okay, that should boost the microphone quite a bit. Let me know if that's a bit louder. Okay, good. I'm using just a pure mixer, and I'm not doing any extra amplification on the actual stream. So this isn't going to be used this way, right? Because I'm going to trust query dot include t goes to t dot tenant. Now those both have clear identifiers, so they should link without any challenge. They should link to the relevant tables without any configuration. Where user identifier, let's write this way, and select t goes to t dot tenant identifier. So the type arguments for specification below TT result. This specification cannot be inferred from the usage. What am I missing there? Query dot select t dot tenant dot identifier. Okay, so it doesn't look like you can just chain them together, but that should work anyway. So this changes yet again, right? To a where. No. Dot list async. Or tenant or not. What does that not like? Use count. Okay. Huh. Interesting. I suppose any would. Oh, they both execute query. Maybe that's just faster internally. Okay, so now essentially this would allow the scenario I was talking about before, right? So if I actually did have multiple tenants that I was associated with and my user wasn't verified, this would update each one of those tenants. So this supports that now. Whether I wanted to support that or whether I want to say, hey, you've not even verified your account, so we're not going to let you register a second one. That's probably a feature I probably want to put in. But I should, for my own sake, I should document that out, right? I'm yet to choose somewhere where I can track all these stories cleanly. And I'm not really configured for good writing right this second. But Yeah. So user was verified. So now this would also need the Saga, right? So this would need Saga persistence. This would also now update that. That solves this problem. So this all relies upon, can I pass in that? Right? Can I pass that information down? Or do I ask them to log in when they redirect to it and then verify it? I'm still not too sure there. But let's assume that no matter what, I'm going to get that identifier, right? That's going to be either my responsibility from the UI side or whatever. But we're going to definitely verify using the user identifier. Safest bet. So let's proceed with this Saga idea. So the orchestration ID. Right? Saga persistence kind of works. Let's go with that. And this would be T retrieve, right, by Saga. So for right now, everything's a GUID. That's fine. And that's it. I don't think I need to await anything here. So let's just do that for right now. And then return value task completed. I need to spend some time and understand when to use task and when to use value task. My understanding so far is that this does not allocate memory if it's not used, whereas task will always, there will always be something allocated there. But I need to do a bit more reading there. But that is why my sudden switch to using value task all the time instead of task. So this is great. The registration Saga marks things as true, right? But ultimately what should happen here is, and this is the hard part now, the actual thing that I want to have happen is this part, right? So I want to publish the tenant was created. But now my Saga, which I'm now going to retrieve through my persistence layer, right? That Saga persistence is going to have to either do dependency injection, right? Because I'm going to need event publisher in there now. Or I'm going to have to come up with some other more convoluted system of doing this. I think it's okay for this, but we'll figure it out. Because this is behavioral, right? This is an actual piece of my application behavior, so I don't see any issues with that. Now, tenant was registered is going to be my establishing event, essentially. And as mentioned before, I'm going to have to do that, which is not really good encapsulation. But we'll have to figure that out in a second. So within Service Bus, when you use Sagas, this is state, right? So public class Saga state or something like that, right? And that's how that's retrieved. So this might not actually end up as public properties anyway. So leaving them like that for now allows me to serialize, deserialize this. But what I might want to do is create an actual state that is its own thing, and then establish the Saga with state, and that way I control access. I don't provide, because right now if I pull the Saga, I can change these variables, which would be bad, because it kind of, even if you know you're not meant to, it provides the ability. And when you provide that sort of ability, you express, oh yeah, you can change this, and a developer who needs to do something quickly will do it, and they will try and change it, or they will do something that is not as intended, and you're hiding it right that way. Or rather, the behavior is hidden because you don't realize there's an unintended side effect somewhere in the system. So you want to be clear about using these. So what I want to do is say, okay, if is tenant registered and is user registered and user is user verified, right? Then publisher dot publish async. So now we have a challenge. Publish async, new tenant created. Right. And that's got a tenant identifier, which in this instance is my actual orchestration ID, and a company name. So that's public string company name. Again, this might not be how I actually do it, but we'll company name equals registered dot company name. So that's company name, right? And the challenge there is I have to do that in both that and that, right? So I've copied and pasted it. So private void publish if complete. But bool complete is registered and is user registered and is user verified. Now we can rewrite that as if complete. Publish time created. Less copying and pasting, more readable, a bit cleaner. Good. And again, I'm working in theory right this second. I haven't even written most of this code. I've written the basics of the structure and kind of what I want to write. Right? So now the way this would look from here, again, this piece has to happen, right? But I do need to also notify the Saga, right? This is me tinkering around with features, so that's not really going to be there in the end. But I need to get the Saga in here and also notify the Saga, hey, things have changed, right? So again, I'm kind of notifying the state, and then the Saga is the one responsible for the actual, hey, I need to do something now. And in this example, I can pretty much control the order of things, right? The only difference is in here, in my register user with provider, I need to change this because I need to know if it exists, and if it exists, then I don't register it. I update it, right? And I then publish that the user was verified already, right, for this tenant. So that user was verified, handler. I can either publish that event, or I can update the Saga directly from there, because I can just say Saga handle, user was verified, which I think I would actually prefer, because then I'm not publishing the event from multiple places. I tend to try and avoid that, right? I tend to try and avoid, sorry if I stepped away there. I tend to avoid publishing those events from different places, because then what's really triggering them? Okay, so I think it's time to try and get that Saga designed, that design a little bit more workable. There's a few challenges. Persistence is one challenge, right? How do I save the actual Saga out? The second challenge is dependency injection. And I think they go hand in hand, because the persistence layer is going to invoke, it's going to produce an instance of the Saga. So this will always get me a new Saga or the current Saga. There's also another piece here, right? Persistence is great. Saving the state of that is great. But when a Saga is completed, I also need to trigger it as, or mark it as complete, and erase the persistence of it, because there's no point in that existing anymore. And leaving it lying around is messy and leaves a lie there. So I'm thinking here that no matter what, this piece is a separate library anyway. Right. Let's put it in shared for now. This I will break out as its own repository. So if anyone actually finds this useful in any way, shape, or form, I will produce it. So it's going to be a .NET 8 class library for Saga. And jumping ahead a little bit here, we're going to create Saga dot SQL server. Right. So the actual persistence and the Saga library itself, the core, shouldn't be one and the same. That's what I'm going for there. Okay, so let's do this. Let's create Saga public GUID. So that's going to be an abstract class. It's going to have GUID orchestration ID. And this is an ID. This doesn't get published. There's nothing. We're not going to share this. Actually, I am referring to it as an identifier. It is an orchestration identifier. I'm being consistent, right? I refer to all IDs that are public as identifiers. That is an identifier I should be able to use and share. It is the entity that I'm going to work with. Okay, so let's go into specifications. No. Subscribers. Okay, so we need a nice Saga persistence layer. And again, anybody watching, if you have any questions, if you want me to divert and discuss why I'm doing this, if you have no idea what code I'm writing, and you want to know, ask the question. I do not object to stopping and going through this and discussing it. Sometimes that is the best way of understanding if you're going, because once you commit to a path, right? Once you start writing code and you kind of throwing code out there, you oftentimes get persistent. I don't know. Persistence. The act of persisting, yes, persistence. I keep wanting to put an A in there. Well, once you start writing this sort of code and you start committing to an amount of code, right? It sometimes becomes a little harder to just backtrack and say, oh, am I really doing the right thing here? So I have no objection to being questioned. Oh, why are you doing this? Well, what is that for? Right? Oh, I don't think you should do it that way because I don't think that makes sense. All perfectly valid. Right? And sometimes that's enough to reflect and say, maybe I shouldn't do it. That's fine. And now let's create a Saga's directory here. Let's move that to Sagas. So in the scheme of things, this is going to be very short-lived. Right? This is going to be a pretty short saga, in that it could be done in a second, it could be done in a few minutes. I mean, it could take a day, it could take 2 days for it to complete because that user might not verify that account. But I do not want to publish this event until this is done. Right? That's my key goal. Maybe we have a complete state. Maybe there is a public bool complete get public abstract, and that is now it's in the Saga public because that's not that. Okay. Now that works. Huh? Why does that work? So complete is always something that we should know about. That's the goal there. Move to the Saga's namespace. Let's introduce our interface. Import missing references. Let's remove our publisher. We are committed. Okay. Orchestration identifier. Okay. My unit tests are completely no, they're not too bad actually. When tenant was registered, this is now totally bought, so that's fine. So back over to Saga. So Saga has this. Saga persistence has this. What do I need to happen? So when I retrieve, it's one thing I haven't allowed for there is store, by the way, because that would be that, right? Because I'd have to persist the current state. So here I would have to say, okay, Saga persistence dot save Saga. That's what I'm trying to see is in the vein of how this saga is described. Each local transaction pushes domain events that trigger local transactions in other services. An orchestrator tells the participants what local transactions to execute. An e-commerce application uses this approach. Create an order using choreography. The order service receives the post request and creates the create order saga. The saga orchestrator creates an order in the pending state that it then sends a reserve credit command to the customer service. So this is behavioral, right? This is the actual, the saga is doing the work. So what I was thinking here was, this doesn't matter. Because this will have done something. So saving it doesn't do anything. But I could do, right, public void on save, right? So save will always invoke on save on the saga. And in that instance, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. And that becomes on save. Right? If complete. So now handling it is one thing. That changes the state of it. And this starts to now look more aggregate-like in terms of these are domain events. And it's doing some behavior. But that would read a little more cleanly, I feel. And now the handle doesn't change the state of the system. The handle just changes the state of the saga. The actual act of doing it should be based upon its state, and the on save is when it triggers that change. And also that save can also say, are you actually complete? And if you are, then you're done. Remove it. Right. Yeah, so let's have a look at the database. So this is where it gets a little harder. No. This would work because each layer. So what I'd do is in the library, I would in the SQL Server part of it, I would actually create the scripts to initialize the database with kind of a context of its own, and then adding the sagas would establish the database connection to the sagas and my brain is these tables would get created, right? So So this would be sagas, right? Be new column ID. That is an int, not null. Identity, new primary key. And this would be column orchestration identifier, unique identifier, not null. And that's all we need. New index on that. Because it doesn't have a name. I know the type. I just need to represent it. Right? Let's go with that. What's the worst happens? Okay, so sagas, and then we need another state table. Saga states. New column. This is. Does this? I mean, it doesn't necessarily need its own unique key, but Saga ID, not null. I'm not going to make foreign keys. It starts to make a mess, and the database gets in a mess. And then state text. What shall I use? Then varchar max. What's the types available to me there? Storing JSON in SQL Server 2022. And varchar max, okay. Log record should be formatted as JSON, okay. I'm not querying it as JSON out of here. I'm going to serialize and deserialize to it. So it doesn't really make a big difference in terms of and varchar max. I just wanted to make sure that there was not an appropriate data type for the actual state. So all I'm going to do is serialize the state object out into that. So I'm thinking, the more I'm thinking through this, the more I'm thinking, yeah, the state matters. Do I need? I don't need two tables then, do I? Let's modify this one. New column state and varchar max. There's no point having a join table just for the sake of the state. If there was more data to represent here, if there was actual multiple states or whatever, then potentially yes. But yeah, that can be null. Let's drop that table. Okay. And go away. I love data grip. I love the JetBrains suite, but sometimes, yeah. Okay, so that's what it would look like. So I'm thinking we have Saga. I think we have Saga state. Saga state. And that is an abstract class of its own. And public state. I think we'll cut down the redundancy. State state get set. That way we can write the persistence to just store the to serialize and deserialize the state. The state itself does not matter to us, right? And that way we're not trying to serialize the saga. We're just serializing the state of the saga. So that does mean that when we establish it, yeah, okay, we'll worry about that later. So it means that over here, right, these are not this, these are not in here anymore, right? Actually, I think that what I want to do is say T state, and that becomes T state, where T state is state. That way, you know, I still have to define it, but now it will be public class tenant registration. Actually, make it internal to me. Public class state, and those go in there now. Can't in all good conscience go like that now. Tenant state. Let's just call it that way. Get very focused on the squiggles. This way, now we do this. There's no point making this external, making this an actual class that you can pick up or change. This now encapsulates this object, so this object is purely down to this. That may cause problems for serialization. We'll come to that later. State. Merge into pattern. Oh yeah. Pattern matching makes that much nicer. Oh yeah, I like that. Okay, it doesn't mean that all these have to be this now, but that's okay. So this is the big challenge, right? Retrieve tenant registration saga. Retrieve where saga. Oh, that just reads beautiful, doesn't it? This is why I like to write code this way, right? I like to write code and evolve it and change it and see how it feels. I have no investment at this point into keeping this code, right? If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it's a horrible pattern, I might not realize it for a long time. I might use this, right? It might do what I need it to do, and that's okay because I know what it does and I can explain what it's doing and I can justify why it's there. The main thing here is that these, no matter what I do, I have to deal with this disconnected events, right? So if someone comes along and says, oh, you should use this pattern or this technology, and I'm like, oh, okay. You know, I did the same with Mediator, right? Mediator was a straight out swap because I could adapt to that technology. So that's okay. Oh, really? I've got to... Ugh. Why does that matter? Retrieve... But you're a saga of this state. The state can be inferred. Yeah. Why can't that be? There's no good way of formatting that. Yuck. Tenant registration saga state. Why can't you infer it? I don't get it. Save. Can that be inferred from the usage? But save T state. That doesn't matter though, does it? Where does it? The thing is, where does it matter, right? The state. I get that I need to initialize it with it. The state is necessary here, but as far as the saga goes, to I create public interface I saga, and I've looked at a lot of eventing systems. I've looked at service bus code. I've looked at mass transit code, and a lot of their code looks like it evolves in a similar way. Oh no, now I need to do this. Okay, I'll make it this way, right? And that's why I do this way. Is it really does feel comfortable. So this would be bool complete. This would be GUID. I want to provide the minimums here, so let's do void save. Nice saga and void save on save. Right. And no. Let's not worry about that one right a second. What I'm trying to do is get to the bare minimum here. So when I'm retrieving, right? When I'm retrieving a saga, saga, right? That's all I care about. That's what I'm trying to get to, right? Do I need all this fluff? No, I don't. I can test for that stuff inside. The only challenge is there now that I'm using an interface here. No, but I know what saga it is. So saga persistence takes the saga where it is an iSaga. Let's worry about that when we actually get to persist in something, which I'm hoping I can get to before the end of this stream, which I have only a few minutes for. So if I don't finish this today, I will continue this tomorrow. You know, as always, you know, I do like discussing this. I do like I do want to know if people have opinions on whether this is the right thing, the wrong way, or the right way, the wrong way. You know, paste the Discord link in both chats. More than welcome to join. It does not require any authorization. But I will more than likely continue this tomorrow. If I don't get there today, well, I'll see if I can get to at least this part, because this would be kind of fun. The challenge is I'm gonna have to make something happen. So this will either work first time or crash in a big pile and not work. So Saga persistence. Well, let's write out the SQL Server version. So it's going to have a few things, right? Context. So this is going to be the Saga DB context. So here we're going to take a dependency on Entity Framework. Technically, wouldn't need to. I could take a dependency. I could do all sorts of things here. I could take a dependency on Dapper. I could write it without using Entity Framework, but it just feels better. And I'm following a similar standard to Ardalis, who added the repository stuff in a SQL Server layer, and that uses Entity Framework underneath. It's not, specifications.entity framework. And we need the SQL Servers piece there, I think. So this is going to be DB context. And our constructor is going to take DB context options, or Saga DB context. Options, base, options. And we're going to have a model, models, Saga. That's not going to be fun. I've just created a very horrible naming conflict there, I think, but we'll find out. I'm going to end up specifying models.saga, and I hate that. So we might be aliasing that. Public int ID, public GUID orchestration. Please help me. I seem to not be able to spell that. Orchestration identifier, and then public string state. Right, those are the columns on the table. So over here, let's add that into our DB set. Saga. That's Sagas. Now, I will add in more here, right? I will add in the whole injectable piece, so that because what I'd like to see this as is, okay, builder.services.add sagas, configure.use SQL Server, right? And configure it in here, and that way that will establish those pieces and create the relevant tables, hopefully. Right, I'd have to create migrations and stuff. So I will, if this works as a pattern, I will add in some nicer layers there to make it more usable library. So what we need here is SQL Server Saga persistence. Okay, this is the Saga persistence. This is the hard part now. So the hard parts come in that what we need to do is have an IDB context factory of Saga DB context factory, and we need an I service provider, which I don't like the idea of. And we're going to have a logger in there because, yeah, that's probably just healthy. The context factory, so that we don't want to maintain an open context. Definitely not in here, right? We want to build, this is going to be a singleton more than likely, and we're going to open and close those connections as necessary. So we're going to end up with some sort of asynchronous stuff in here eventually. I can tell already because there's just so many pieces that are asynchronous, including that event. So that's going to trip me up. Because right now I'd have to do gateway to make that non-asynchronous. So var, yep, that work. If, yep, that works. Create instance service provider. Oh no, not quite, but close. Not far off. Service provider dot get required. It's required. I can't. You can't. It can't proceed if it doesn't get it. Null is not an option here. And that's going to be type of T. And there's the problem. Really? That's Saga. It's the Saga nullable. No. So I know that it is a Saga. I don't know about its type of state. So if I can't fit it in the interface, I end up with that messy API of having to know the state every time I know the Saga. But to me, that should be an internal consideration of the Saga, shouldn't matter to how I use it, right? Because it's an implementation detail of the individual Saga, not of this, right? Like this could have state, right? That's okay. Public new. How would I write that? That would be So that would be what's the right way to write this? I know I need state. That's going to be the public component of it, the state. If I pass a generic down here, that is not going to do what I want to do. That's not a decoration. I need access to it from the interface because otherwise when I go to persist it, right, Right? This is all very well and good. Let's T Saga just to make that clear. T Saga question mark that something like that. Has to right. Again, my naming is going to trip me up here. This is not T Saga. This is actual Saga. That's not what that is though, right? Because var instance equals as T Saga. Add class constraint to type. Yeah, that makes sense. What that's telling me is that on here that has to be class, right? Class comma. Have to put that first, which is fine. It has to be an instance. It can't just be because you could pass around more interfaces in there otherwise. Class comma. Right. That means that I can treat this if instance is null, throw invalid argument exception for right this second. Yeah, probably not the best type. Because what it's going to do here is new new Saga, and that's going to be orchestration identifier equals identifier. State is null, although it would actually be instance dot state. Didn't you what I wanted to do? I'll worry about serialization options and stuff afterwards. Okay, I gotta tie this up. I want to get to a point. So if the Saga is null, right? This actually might be what Delta was kind of talking about in arbitrary breaking things up. If it's not, I still need to create this instance, right? This is always going to happen because I need an instance of it to populate all the time. Because even if I'm not deserializing this from the database, I'm deserializing its state and setting its state. So I'm going to serialize the instance state and save that in the database. And I want to return instance. Right. If Saga is not null, yeah, it's not that easy. Otherwise, I want to instance.state equals JSON serializer deserialize, and here we go. That isn't code. Why would you suggest that? That's not a thing. That is not a thing. I've never written that. So the problem is I don't know the type. So no matter which way I go at this, right, I have to know the type of the Saga data. Is the point here. We're not even going to worry about that in a second. We're going to worry about that afterwards. I mean, that's essentially that plus that. Right this second. So another way of doing it would be I could store the type of the state in the database, and then I could deserialize the object and attach it, right? Because it would know how to deserialize that object. That would be an option. I don't like that idea. I mean, if I change the state, that doesn't make a difference. Unfortunately, I am at pretty much the edge of the time I can allot for today for the stream. So I'm going to wrap up a little bit here. So overall, started to move towards this pattern. Again, the overall goal is to make sure that I can react to the changing state of the system as these events are not I can't control the timing of these events, right? I don't dictate when it's going to be complete. But again, I do want to verify that I do not want to create unnecessary events in the system. If a user doesn't validate their account, what is the point in firing off an event to say, hey, create everything in the system, establish all this information, for them never to confirm it, and then load of data sat there being wasted. Especially if I move this to something like Azure or a cloud-based platform where those resources cost. So allocating resources unnecessarily is not something I want to do. So I really do want to consider this. I have not seen if there is an existing pattern that fits this. So I might be building something that I don't need here. But it feels right this second. It feels like it's okay to do this. Right. So again, the Saga will be the long running piece, right? It will be responsible for cleaning itself up, storing itself with this extension to the SQL Server component. It means that I could create a Couchbase version or whatever and see which is faster or which I prefer. Couchbase might actually not be a bad persistence layer, so maybe I'll write that as well, and we can test them in parallel. Once we've got this working, the theory of it is good, right? This having the service provider, this always feels bad to inject the service provider to be able to get instances of objects, but it's always available, right? Once we're in the stack, the service provider is there. It is an injectable entity, so I don't think there's a problem with doing it. So I'm going to continue down this. Again, if you have questions, if you have any thoughts or opinions, the Discord link is in the chat. I'd love to hear, how would you solve this problem? That is something that I'd be very interested in understanding. And yeah, so I will leave it there. And I will, it says I've got 8 people in Twitch. That seems like a wasted raid opportunity. If anyone's streaming, I don't know, Deflux, are you still there? If there's anybody actually streaming that I could raid into. Oh, Miss Pixie's streaming again. There we go. I'm going to send you over to Miss Pixie. She's learning, she's at school, I believe, and she's learning how to code. So I will send you over there in Twitch. I don't know how correct that was in YouTube. But thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great day. literally just going to be right back, but I do not have the time to do that. So thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. Take care. Have a great day. And I will see you again soon.